So, I lived in the same house for about 10 years or so when this happened, and quite a few scary things happened to me and my sister as we shared a bedroom. Well, about 5 years into living in that house, my sister was about 10, and she was on the top bunk of our bunk bed. In the middle of the night, she suddenly screamed, and I woke up asking what happened. She said she looked over the bunk bed rail and saw a figure in white, a female, walking around. For the sake of keeping her calm, I told her it was me getting up to get a drink. She accepted it and went back to sleep. It wasn't me. Since then, nothing happened until we moved into a different room in the house, switching rooms with our parents since they were putting down new carpet. After that first week, I started getting woken up in the middle of the night from different things. Some of them were just from something smacking my bed, like a large book. Several times, I woke up with someone whispering in my ear. I would hear things fall to the floor, but in the morning, nothing had. There was only one time I ever saw anything, and I believe it to be a different, spirit than the one that woke me up all the time. It was standing over my bed, and for the few seconds I saw it, I saw my grandfather, who died when I was 10. This was kind of weird, but I almost expected it, as 4 other people in my family had seen his spirit, and my grandmother thinks he's watching over us and keeping bad away. I screamed, and after that, I stopped being woken up in the morning by whatever, until it came back a few months, but there were fewer incidents. Ever since I moved into my dorm room, there's been nothing, which is good. The only noise I hear is the person next door getting ready for work in 3 in the morning. And now, since my sister has taken over my bed at home, I've been sleeping in the guest/game room. I've never had anything happen to me. Still, just thinking about it makes me freak out. I remembered this imaginary friend named George. I would always talk to him and have a good time. So I asked my mother about him one day to bring back past memories, but she tensed up before she told me the story. I was about 6 or 7 when this all occurred, living in a very old neighborhood in Fort Worth, Texas. My family and I had just moved into our new house, which was about a few minutes walk away from where we were originally living. My father was very excited to call this new place ours, because the last one we were in, we had to pay rent, so he was more than happy for this new move, a new change for us. My mother, on the other hand, she had an eerie feeling when she looked at it. She would say there was something wrong with it, but my dad brushed it off, thinking she was just scared at the thought of living in a new home and leaving our old one. A few days later, we moved in. Everything was fine for the most part. That was until my mother hit depression. The only explanation was the house. Although depression doesn't usually have a trigger, it just happens. But she knew something was wrong. It was something more. She would be too terrified to hold knives while cooking because she thought she would harm me. She felt like something was taking over her. But at that same time, began to speak to my imaginary friend. His name was George. From what my mom had told me, and from what I remember telling her, he was a tall, older-looking man who seemed to always be around me. One day, she caught me in a trance, speaking to the man who was so-called George. He would tell me about his death and how it happened. I don't remember much about it, but apparently he fell from the tallest tree in our backyard to the cement. But being a kid, you don't think much about it. You think they're kidding around. Not to mention this house was built in 1940, still having the same old doorknobs and everything. You don't put those into account when you have this close friend. Time passed. I spent time with George, and everything seemed to slowly get better. I had an 8-month-old little brother, and I was now 8. But my mother still wasn't doing well. She would hear crying, loud baby screeching, but when she turned to my little brother, he was sleeping. He was safe and sound in his bed. But I had almost the same experience as well. One night, I was about to go to sleep as well when I heard a baby crying. Feeling my heart skip a beat, I told my mom the next morning, but she just responded, "It was a cat," to spare my trauma, I suppose. It got to the point where her depression was so bad, she had to call a priest who cleansed her house. After the cleansing, she felt a little more steady, and my friend George, well, he was gone. I never saw him, spoke to him again. I'm not a huge Catholic person like my mother. I'm actually a Buddhist, so I found that a bit strange that everything just suddenly stopped. I am now 16, and I think back to all the crazy experiences I had in that house. My family and I managed to move 2 years ago, and I did not have those same experiences, and when I think about George, I don't see him as a threat, but it's still creepy to think that the imaginary friend you had was actually a dead guy. I grew up in a house with most of my family, which a lot of them claimed was haunted, but until my late childhood, I never believed a word. Until the night I fell asleep in my mom's bed. To start, I'm an adult now in my late 20s. I live with my wife-to-be in Canada. The story I want to tell happened when I was 9, I think, and I've never really talked about it. It's not terrifying or horror, but super creepy. My family moved a lot within my city when I was a kid. It was my mom, my grandma, my baby sister, and me. My mom worked nights. She's a nurse, and normally wasn't home until 8 or 9 in the morning. My grandma at the time was in remission from lung cancer. She was an insomniac, so even though she had a room, she normally stayed up in the living room watching late night Law and Order reruns. Anyways, on this night, my mom agreed to let me fall asleep in her room, as young kids are allowed to do. She had a pretty comfortable bed, and my grandma was in the living room as usual if I needed anything. I was pretty tired, so I fell asleep pretty fast. I should probably mention I'm a hard sleeper. My family jokes that I'd sleep through a hurricane. I've never had night terrors or anything like that either, which makes this harder to explain rationally. My mom went to work right after I went to bed, gone for the night to her job. I could hear the Law and Order theme playing as I dozed off, so I knew where my grandma was. I slept pretty well until I woke up to a sudden heavy weight at the end of the bed. My eyes flashed open quickly, but at first I wasn't too worried, as I thought maybe my grams had come in to check on me and rubbed my back. Grandma kind of stuff, until I heard her cough from the living room. I froze, my head under the covers, refusing to move them, thoughts running through my head. Was my mom home early? No. If it was my mom, she would have moved closer, or laid down beside me, not sit at the end of the bed, seeming to stare at me. No words. Was it my little sister, sneaking out of her room to sleep in mom's bedroom? No, the weight was too much, too heavy, like a grown adult. Then, I started to feel uneasy, unsafe. The weight wasn't moving, just like it was sitting there, watching me, knowing I was awake and could sense it there. I wasn't willing to move. I barely breathed, just hoping it would go away. But it didn't. For what seemed like hours, but was probably mere minutes, the standoff continued. Me hiding under the covers, it sitting there, stoic, unnerving, intimidating, until finally, the weight lifted and went away, taking the sense of dread with it. I was feeling drained and exhausted, and that led to me finally blacking out into the safety of sleep, waking up just in time to hear my mom come in the front door.